December 19th, 2025. Guys, I'm working on a video that I'm not quite through with yet. I don't have it complete. I don't have it like the way I like it, but I want to kind of give you a short update on what I'm working on, and I'm going to give you a little bit of information here. It's just been a long couple of days, and I'm not quite through with the other one. But we've been talking about the Anunnaki and the spaceports and all of that. I want to kind of look at that for just a moment. And what's happening, and this information, a lot of it started out coming from Zecharia Sitchin and a few other people that knew how to read the Sumerian text. And I think Zecharia died in 2010, but they found more and more seals, and more than they can translate. And as we're getting newer information in now from these other seals, but this goes back, this is pre-2010, but there's, again, maps now showing some of this, and I'm going to show you that. It's very interesting, and it's going to give you an idea of what I'm trying to put together. But let's read from this section of the 12th planet, I think it is, and this is titled, or this particular chapter, The Messianic Clock. It says, several texts describe how the Anunnaki set up their settlements in the Eden. Notice how that's spelled, the post-diluvial Sumer, each with a specific function and all laid out in accordance with the master plan. Listen to what that was. It says the crucial space connection, the ability to constantly stay in communication with the home planet and with the shuttlecraft and spacecraft. Remember the heavy lifters for the gold? They had to get it to Mars where the atmosphere was very thin, the gravity was very low, and you did not need all of that energy and the heavy lifters and that fuel to go from that relay point. They were getting gold back to their planet, which comes again every 3,600 years in an orbit between Mars and Jupiter. And that's what they're talking about, 3,600 years. Now, what they're finding out in the new tablets, and that's what I'm working on now, is that a lot of people had put Abraham in the like the first millennium BC, but it looks like he was 3rd millennium BC, looking at some of the newer tablets. Anyway, it says the crucial space connection again. They wanted to stay in touch with the home planet and with the shuttlecraft and spacecraft. And what they did, guys, was create a landing zone and a spaceport and a way to get in there that was almost impossible to screw up. And you could see it from space very well. Anyway, and it says it was maintained from Enlil's command post in Nibiru. Again, we're going to look at a map of this area during that time. It says this was the heart of which was a dimly lit chamber called the Enki. Not Enki, but A-N-K-I, the bond, which means the bond of heaven and earth. That's there at that connection at spaceport. Another vital facility was a spaceport located at Sippar, S-I-P-P-A-R, which means Bird City. Nibiru lay at the center of concentric circles at which the other cities of the gods were located all together. They shaped out for an arriving spacecraft. And what it was, guys, they had looked at the 2 peaks on Mount Ararat and drew concentric lines that angled out slightly as they expanded and came right over Iraq out into the Persian Gulf. And we'll look at that map. It's very interesting because it was, if you're coming in from, it was like say a space shuttle was coming back, and it'd probably fly over a continent before it got down and it would land, remember? Well, the same thing was happening here. And they set this up that way. But again, it would lay at Nibiru, not Sippar, the bird city, but Nibiru, where the command was, again, lay at the center of concentric circles at which the other cities of the gods were located. All together, they shaped out for an arriving spacecraft a landing corridor whose focal point was the Near East most visible topographic feature, the twin peaks, let me pull this down, of Mount Ararat, the Mount Ararat of Noah. And guys, if you've seen my video on Göbekli Tepe, and you've probably seen hundreds of videos about it and pictures, it's all animals. And that would have been in the very area that Noah landed with the animals. And a lot of people think that the human race was the most important. But he created the animals first. Then he needed men to take care of them. Well, when you look at the reports like we saw today, to where a Russian ship was sank in the Mediterranean by Ukraine, and you got whales, you got dolphins, you got all kind of wildlife that now will be destroyed, just like we had the Gulf oil spill here in the Gulf of America, guys. And so man has not been a good tender of God's creatures. And that's why Noah was not the reason the ark was built. Just like you see, again, going to the columns, they're 18 feet tall at Göbekli Tepe. It's all animals, and that's where the ark landed, was up from that on Mount Ararat. And they built out, as the waters receded, they built out. And those temples held up, the columns held up roofs over that section, and it was big corrals. They've shown about 2 or 3 that they've excavated, but it goes further back into the hill, and it looks like a zoo. But anyway, the earth was created as a zoo by our Father, for life. And if you think about the old movie, it was one of the Star Trek, I think one of the more modern ones in the day, was they came down in a heavy lifter craft, and they pulled a whale out of the ocean to save it. You remember that? And I think that has, I don't know why I sidetracked that, but Göbekli Tepe to me is a zoo to protect the animals. And part of it being underground is just like what we saw with some of the underground cities right there in the same area. It was going to get very cold. They were to be protected. And you saw in the video that I did about that they had animals down in the underground cities with them, and it would hold 20,000 people. Things like that. Anyway, they built this landing corridor, and I'm show you the map, where the focal point was the Near East's most visible topographic feature, the Twin Peaks of Mount Ararat. And there's a picture of it in the Messianic Clock section of the 12th planet. And guys, we've talked about Baalbek, and they call it the landing zone, and it has the largest rocks ever quarried of anything built ever. You know, like 100,000 pounds are huge. I don't know exact weight, but no one's ever been able to deal with rocks that big stones. You know what I'm saying? You've seen it. And that was to support a very heavy weight. By the way, again, that's why they called it the landing zone. And it continues here, it says, as they built that spaceport, and then the deluge swept over the earth, obliterated all the cities of the gods with their mission control center and spaceport, and buried the Eden under millions of tons of mud and silt. Everything had to be done over again, and they did it. But much could no longer be the same. First and foremost, it was necessary to create a new spaceport facility with a new mission control center and new beacon sites for the landing corridor. The new landing path was anchored again on the prominent Twin Peaks of Ararat. The other components were all new. The actual spaceport in the Sinai Peninsula on the 30th parallel north, artificial Twin Peaks as beacon sites were the Giza pyramids. And the new mission control center was at a place called Jerusalem. And you look at some of those walls around the Temple Mount in those areas, some of them have very big stones, and it kind of reminds me of Baalbek, very close proximity also. And got some of the stuff that I'm working on has to do with the pyramids also. Marduk, who some call Satan, and I won't argue with that, he wanted to come in and take over that area, which was, again, what we call Babylon and in Iraq. And he was coming through Canaan, which is where Jerusalem and all of that is, through there, coming out of Egypt. And he had such a powerful army with him that the Anunnaki, that Marduk was coming in there. They had locked him up in the pyramid to die. And people cut a shaft, some of his crew, and got him out. And he ended up building a huge army. Some call it, even say it was a mutant army. And coming back, in other words, he had coming out of Egypt, cutting across Canaan, headed right to where the spaceports were. Well, the Anunnaki kind of freaked out on the other side of the deal, Enki and that group. And they, remember we talked about the nuclear war, the first nuclear war, and the family had nuclear weapons. Well, Marduk was really creating havoc on his path coming through Canaan. And so they voted, they had to vote, the council did, if they could use the nuclear weapons to stop Marduk from coming in there and destroy all of their cities. And let's take a look at that map. Now let's look at the spaceport for a minute. It's very interesting. Guys, this comes from information from a group that knew Zecharia Sitchin before he died, and he had asked them to please continue this study. It would be very important. And this is a very hard to read map right here. Spaceport is right here, and what you're looking at is the Persian Gulf, and here's where the rivers dump out. And this triangle, guys, is where they actually had radar and everything else. They could see not only planes, they could see deep into space, because again, they were looking for their shuttles and stuff. But this was the incoming angles here. And remember, it said cities were built on concentric circles, right? And there's these different cities here, and some of those are very interesting. But it's not a very good map, so what I want to do is show you a map of the same area, and you just kind of keep an eye on where that triangle's coming in again, right through this area of the Persian Gulf and to the city of Sippar. Now this map, much clearer, is what they call the cities revealed in the Sumerian king list. That's what we're talking about, the Anunnaki. Now here is Sippar right there. See Akkad. Babylon was eventually built very close to this area. Here's Sumer, guys, and here's Sarapaq. And what we're going to find out in some of the newer tablets in the studies is that Noah ended up being like the mayor or the consulate of Sarapaq. Now, again, we're talking about the Old Testament and the Sumerian clay tablets. But remember, a lot was changed when things got into the hands of Rome and the scribes and the Pharisees. Anyway, there's Nippur right there, but Sippar was where everything was landing. In your corner here is the Persian Gulf. So that triangle came in about, its top northern section was about right there, and it came in here, and Sippar was the landing point. And I guess the arrow coming out of there, it's really hard to read on that map, was like your exit flight. But everything pointed to Ararat, and then when the first flood, that big flood came through, then they rebuilt it, not exactly the same, but they used, instead of the twin peaks of Mount Ararat, they used the peaks of the biggest two pyramids, guys. Again, 30th parallel here. Now, some very interesting things are going to come up in the video that I'm working on, about, again, Abraham was in the, not first millennium or second, but third millennium BC, going back. And he was in this area. If you read Genesis chapter 14, you're going to see where Abraham took 300 and maybe 18 men, whatever it was, and they defeated 4 kings. Abraham was a major general to the Anunnaki, to the Sumerian kings, guys. And that's why they're now dating it back to 3rd millennium BC. But Genesis 14 tells of the battle, and it was to rescue Lot and his family that had been kidnapped by these 4 kings, and these kings are named in Genesis 14. Well, anyway, Abraham was rewarded like a big military ceremony and everything, but he was like a general. And he didn't just command those 300 and something people. Those were people of his that were like his sons and grandsons and things like that. They were his family. But he was sent by the Anunnaki, by the people that were there, to stop those 4 kings. Now again, coming from the left here is Canaan. That's, again, where Jerusalem was. It was in Israel then. And you had Jericho, those towns. Marduk was coming through there, again, what they were calling a mutant army. Just terrible destruction. So the kings, the Anunnaki, had to get the council together. First, it says that they had to contact the home planet to get permission to use the nuclear weapons. The weapons were hid in a cave. Anyway, message came back from the home planet, use them, because they were going to be overrun and destroyed if they didn't. And that's why, in Canaan, man, they took it. And guys, that goes to the thing about Abraham and Lot and Sodom and Gomorrah getting decimated by a nuclear blast. In the scrolls, in the newer information, Abraham, being a general, and Lot were designated to cause that explosion. I don't know if they called the missile strike in or whatever it was. They had nuclear weapons. It goes much deeper than what the scribes and Pharisees, the crumbs they left us. But anyway, you're going to find out in that upcoming video about some of these cities. You got, again, Serapis, Noah City. Was the main city that Abraham dealt with. I think it was once that some of the liftoffs began and the protection was taken, people in the area started getting killed. And that appears to be when Abraham took Sarah and they went back to Haran. Remember the first video that was over in Turkey? In the big square area there, Haran? That's because there was problems here. That's why he went. It doesn't talk about that a lot. But again, Marduk was coming. So the Anunnaki elders voted and they blasted Canaan. And the cities were decimated. That may be why you only see sections of the landing zone like Baalbek. And you know there was much destruction through that entire area. They know that it was at least 2,000 degrees to cause what they call the glass melts and things like that. But it was called the Battle of the Pyramids. And it's a very long tale. It's, again, coming from Sumerian clay tablets and scrolls are those cylinders that you can roll over and reprint them. You know what I'm talking about? And they're, even in Zechariah Sitchin's time, they had way more than he could get to or anybody else. And they continued finding them, and they still are translating them. But tying Abraham to Noah into it became the Akkadian after the Sumerians kind of died out, after the protection was taken. But before that, Noah and Abraham were tied in with these people. Noah may even been a half Anunnaki, because what they're saying now in some of the newer seals is that Anunnaki, they were larger than we were. They looked like us, but they were larger. But they had a gene that had a very long lifespan. And that's why it looks like some of the people in the Old Testament, again, Methuselah and that entire group up to Noah, lived very long. Very interesting. Nothing wrong with learning. That is to me, especially when you can look at maps and go back and see the cities and all, a picture's worth 1,000 words. And it's very interesting to me, but I think because the first written language ever were these clay tablets and cylinders. And they're finding sites to back it up, inscriptions on the columns. Remember that, about the gods leaving Earth. But we're going to get a little deeper into that, the War of the Pyramid, Satan versus you had Satan in there, you had Yahweh in here coming all in. It's a very amazing information. But again, we're going to get into that. I didn't really mean to make this one this long, but at least we got to talk a little bit. Watch for the updates, guys. It's just been a rough couple of days, but it's going to get better, and I can get more done when we don't have all the distractions and all of that. Anyway, we're watching it. You watch it. Have a Merry, Merry Christmas. It's a heads up. Be safe.